Okay, I'm really excited about these folks because it's not that they have all the answers, it's that they're out there and they're pushing the boundary. They're thinking about how do I accomplish what I need to accomplish with the tools I have, and where should we go? What do we need to consider? So with that, I'm going to ask Paul to introduce himself first and tell us where he's at on his journey with AI.
Okay. Well, first, is this on? Yes. So Paul Boothby, I'm our supply chain director for insulation and owns Corning. And I'm also working for really trying to transform our enterprise from digital view, everything but manufacturing. So it's kind of funny why I'm here. So, what we're looking at and what I'm looking at in this whole space and really trying to explore with agency and agent AI is when you look at an enterprise, whether it's sourcing, whether it's finance, supply chain, manufacturing, HR, you have people. We're all looking at information. We're making decisions. We're predicting things. We're looking at optionality, and then we're communicating it, right? We're going to communicate it from, hey, manufacturing to supply chain, something happened. Okay, scenarios, decision, action. Hey, customer service, we need to tell the customer something. And we keep transferring this information back and forth between functions. And then, by the way, we also may have metrics that are conflicting with one another, and maybe I don't send you everything, right? And so what we're really looking at is, if you really look at this whole idea, is first off, if you do it right, those lines start to get fuzzy, right? You're having these agents communicate across borders without actually caring about borders, right? And what we're trying to do, and we started in supply chain and customer service, which we feel is a pretty ripe area, a lot of data, a little more structured than maybe in manufacturing itself. And really, again, starting with bringing information to users, having it determine based on scenarios, these are the things you should do when something goes wrong in the network. Make those suggestions, and it can be across hundreds of orders all at once. Give it context, and then from there, the user say yay or nay, and then the action proceeds. What we're working on next and trying to continue to build is great. Now talk to my customer service agent and take that information, filter out maybe things I don't want to tell my customer, right? Big manufacturing issue, and then keep that flow going. And so, if I had this ultimate vision, would be that same flawless flow from all the way at the front of the supply chain to the very customers themselves, where that information, data is just all working together to drive what you're really trying to drive, which is a better outcome and performance of your company and the satisfaction of your customers. So that's what we're trying to do. I'm in no way an expert, and that's why they're going to help me understand more.
Let's just go down the line here.
Okay, I was going to say, Paul, that was really good. So my name is Mike Tomasco. I am currently the CIO at Fujifilm Diosynth Biotechnology. So we make biological products for other pharmaceutical companies. And in my former role, I was leading digital manufacturing at a company that worked on one of the big vaccines there. So I have two different perspectives on this. I've only been in my new role for about 2 months, so I'm still learning what's going on there and how to piece things together. It's much more foundational focused about trying to think about how we want to embed different types of math and then AI into our processes versus where I came from, where we were pretty far along in that journey. And I think supply chain probably is the best place to start with an agentic journey, let's say. We were doing some things with manufacturing shop floor and quality information that could feed information into our supply chain and help make decisions. So we didn't quite get to the point, to your point, of actually having this fully working and whatnot. But the theory was there to start driving it out. And now what I can do is I can take those learnings and apply them to my new situation. So what worked well, what didn't work well in terms of approach. And I think the biggest lesson for me is just everything depends on where you're starting from, right? Everybody's on a different journey. So if you don't have some of the basic foundations of your data in your enterprise under control or planned out to help support this journey, it becomes much more difficult to realize it. And I think a lot of my perspectives today will probably be around the types of things that I see that are important to helping enable that journey, so that you can eventually get there. Because Mark said before, it depends on what problem you're trying to solve, right? So supply chain planning or sharing data with customers, that's a big deal for my new company. We want to be as transparent as we can in that process because we are making products for other people. And we need to make sure that we plan that out appropriately. We have the right levels of security around all of our data as well, because it's all customer-driven information, and we want to make sure that that's under control. So that's a bit different perspective for me from where I came from, where it was all our own data. Now I'm using other people's data as well in my own processes. So that is a whole new way to look at things too, a new complexity that's quite interesting to try to understand. So.
I'm not sure how I follow that, but I'll try. So Mike Carroll recently retired from Georgia Pacific. So yeah, this is it for me. So yeah, you all laughed and smiled, and you say no way, right?
Yeah, no way.
Yeah, but that's what happens when you retire. So I think for me, it's really all about, it's not what you know, it's how you ask better questions. Mm. And so you're all here, right, to try and figure out how to ask better questions. And in order to do that, you got to go do the work. There is no easy button. The easy button is a trap door to failure, right? And that trap door to failure means that you get to do this over and over and over again. And if you don't have the right foundation, which I know you're going to talk about, that trap door is deeper than you can possibly imagine. And so when you think about this stuff, it is simply this. Think about a future that is not very far away, where you are, instead of the thing that you carry around with you, which I didn't bring up here with me, which is your phone, changed your life. You went from the Stanley Milgram world of being separated from every other person on the planet by 6 other people to 3 other people. And so says LinkedIn. It's actually 3.47, right? To soon, and it's not a technology issue. It is a us issue. Mm-hmm. You'll be separated from every other person, everything else on the planet by 1 degree. 1. So all the structure that exists that says you get information through a network doesn't exist that way anymore. Nobody else intermediates information for you and tells you what's true or not true. None of that stuff exists in the way you thought about it before. It comes to you directly in the way it was developed. Media is adjacent. Interpretation is adjacent. It comes directly to you, separated by 1 degree. That is the fundamental change in the world and in your job and in our organizations that we can't possibly fathom. That's why you have to go do the work. That's why the foundational elements are all so important, because you have to figure out how to interrogate evidence in a different way, because you're the one interrogating the evidence now, not somebody else. So figure out how to ask better questions in that world, because it's tomorrow.
That's why I was shaking my head when Mike says he's retiring. I don't think so, Mike. Malik Patel, I'm Global Director for Dow. My team leads digital operations, IT/OT organization. And prior to that, I also led the digital manufacturing program. So I'm a little bit interested in the foundational element that Mike talked about, because that's where the heavy lifting gets done. Dow has a global footprint, right? So we are almost in close to 100 sites globally, and 30 plus countries. So anytime when we implement a digital technology, it's in combination of the digital tool working closely with the associated work processes. So think about challenges that Paul described. We call it scale to produce. So you build a facility or modify a facility, you make the product that your customer wants, with an intent to get it over to them when they want it and where they want it, right? And in order to do that, you have to do that, understand the demand plan to fulfill that demand. Scale to produce and fulfill that demand is a big deal for a company our size that has plants in every possible geography. And then we are talking about implementing or doing it better than what we have done for the last 127 years, because it's a company that was founded that long ago. So how do you then introduce the technology that would allow you to make better decisions than what you have already been making for all these years? So that's a big part of it. And you're not going to get the support, the investment, and everything else that you need unless you can prove that you can do that and scale it to all those plants, right? So that's a big part of it. So one of the things that we have done is taken a step back, including today we talk about AI, but I think we took a step back and said, hey, what do we need in terms of the foundational enabling technologies? And today in Mark's slide, you saw that number one was data quality, right? So the challenge that you're facing is not just to somehow figure out a way to implement some portion of AI, it doesn't matter any one of those three, but how do you enable it so that the data that's coming out of it, the analytics that's coming out of it, is one, trustworthy, the data is maintainable, and you can continuously get better. So the decision that it's making, it's better. So that's why we have taken a step back in putting those components in place that allows us to have better data quality. Everybody's dealing with the shared data sources, too many of them out there. How do you bring those together? They're of different formats, different topologies, right? And then what the AI revolution just in last, I would say 2 years did was the expectation got changed so that you're not only dealing with just the structured data, which was a problem when we were talking about digital twins just a couple of years ago. Now you're also dealing with an expectation to have unstructured data and have the orchestration done so that the answers you are getting is coming from the right sources to make the decision. So that's what we are talking about. I think pulling it all together, Mike and the team has done probably most work, I would say. Yeah, this Mike. Well, your previous job you probably did, but
Mike
that's
one,
what we'll
Mike
talk
two.
about.
So let's pick on orchestration for a minute,
Yeah.
if I may. You're probably not going to be able to have somebody else do your orchestration for you. And probably the best example of that is for those of us that are married or have life partners, whatever your situation. Imagine yourself that all of a sudden you need to go convince your partner you want to go do something, right? Except now I'm going to ask Malik to go convince my wife for me that I want to go do something. Now he can't do that because he doesn't have the context or the perspective to go convince my wife of anything, right? And that's what happens when you give somebody else the autonomy to go do orchestration for you, right? Is you hand over the perspective that's yours that they don't have, the context that's yours that they don't have, to somebody else and say, go make a case that I'm going to take the top layer of my understanding of something and the things that I go do to accomplish those things and try and convince somebody that I'm going to interrogate the data in a certain way that makes sense. And what's your wife going to say to you? She's going to look at Malik and go, you going to tell my husband? No. Right? And that's what happens. You have to be your own orchestrator. You can't sub that out because you are your context. And that's why these foundational elements matter so much in this world, because you contain all that knowledge and know-how and all that information in order to make all that work. Go ahead, man.
I think what that brings to mind for me is a small group we had at the last company that was focused on trying to optimize a process. And it was good old-fashioned product optimization. It's a product that had, let's call it 20 different biological subcomponents that had to be brought together. It had a 2-year cycle time, and there was a shortage on the market for the product. So the more that we could get through the process in a faster time frame, the benefit for patients was immediate, right? So we had two young MIT grads on the team that were tasked with trying to figure this out, and they were up against a team of supply chain planners who had a series of spreadsheets that were quite fancy, trying to figure out how to best optimize this process. And they went through a bunch of different iterations. So it's kind of the foundational basis for the creation of a potential agent. So the hardcore math and the optimization algorithms behind the scenes that could be called upon in the future by an agent. But before we could ever get that far and simplify the process like that, it was proving to the human that the plans that had been simulated a million times over were better than the ones they came up with in the spreadsheet. Which, believe it or not, the barrier to proving that's pretty high, because you have somebody that's been doing this for 20, 30 years and they have a good plan. And then your algorithms are starting to piece together things that don't make human intuitive sense, right? So it's that convincing your wife concept that Mike was talking about. So we had to convince the supply chain planner that this non-intuitive combination of ingredients. Now, mind you, we didn't add more lines. We didn't add more raw materials or anything into the process. Same set of inputs, getting a throughput that was 20% higher through just better planning.
Dealing with complexity in a different way.
So that then, for me, becomes the basis for, once you prove that you can do that on the most complicated product, you can start to work on the easier ones as well, and then start to create some agents around this, or an experience within which that supply chain planner can become more effective. So you start to multiply the value of what that human and the logic that they use, because they would talk to them about their choices. What choices do you make when you're making these decisions, and build that into how the algorithm worked. And that helped it iterate each time better and better. And then once they had that optimized, you could then imagine a world where you have a simple little web screen that now is part of their supply chain planning cockpit, and they can just ask it to do a couple different things for them. And if you like the result, give it the autonomy to go change the SAP planning parameters. We happen to use SAP, that drives the entire plan for everybody all the way down to the shop floor. So you can see a world where you start to build these things out over time, but it's not what we see in the media, right? It's not Sam Altman telling you that this is the year of agents and the whole world's going to change. I mean, that's what they want to sell you, because they want to make more and more money. But in our practical reality, in this type of industrial manufacturing, it's brick by brick, piece by piece,
Foundation by foundation.
foundation by foundation.
And maybe to add to that, you kind of highlighted an interesting point there. You took some programmers, we'll call it, and then a supply chain group, and kind of had battle of the technology, we'll call it. And the one thing when doing this work, and I think this is important for if this agent AI or any of this is ever going to.
So you said doing the work.
Oh,
All
yes.
of you heard that, right? You got to go do the work.
Yes, we do. And I think one of the biggest things, because again, there's I'm going to go to the Gartner conference, and there's going to be 1 million companies try to sell you supply chain planning software. That's what they do. But a lot of times, supply chain folk really complain about it because there's a lot of black box math. I don't know what's going on there. Yeah. And I think the same thing could happen here, and why the context, it's almost, again, the European Union is going to require the context, right? Is, excuse me, agent, why did you recommend these choices to me? Yeah. That way you really start to understand, hopefully in a more simplistic way. Don't tell me the exact math, but what's really going on in there. And again, when I talk through this decision-making tool that we've developed, again, when I look at it today, it would be done in spreadsheets or a planning software, or 5 people in a room just saying something went wrong, and my complex network of interchangeability, we got to solve this thing. And so what we're really doing is bringing this context forward, teaching. It may bring bad answers that we had to help it learn, and again, have the supply chain planners that actually do the work today help this change, recognizing this will release them to do different work that's more difficult, less transactional, and really going to use more of this. And that to me is where folks are getting excited. And I'm kind of curious. I was going to ask the audience how many people started down this journey, because one cool thing I've found in our company is I have people from other functions and departments raising their hand, volunteering to be on this program just because they want to learn and see. And so there are people that got permission from their managers that said, I want to do this. And to me, that's really powerful on people want to be involved in this change. And I think that's really going to make the big differences going forward. And so if you're going down this journey too, I would recommend be open to letting some people come experiment with you as well. Because again, that's just going to help the drive and change management, which in some ways is the hardest part, to be honest.
So I like this concept of talking about doing the work. That just makes sense to me, and that's just how I think about things. But I mean, how many people in the room have a senior executive, like myself included, that really sees something in this AI, Gen AI, Agentic AI space and wants you to just go figure it out and thinks there's a magic button to just make it happen? I mean, everybody's hand probably should be raised. Like, okay, we're all afraid it's being recorded. But the point is, like, there is no magic button to do this stuff. It sounds like it when you read a news article or you watch a vlog or whatever, or a TikTok, whatever you might do. But there really isn't. Like, you have to dig deep into these problems and you have to try one. And oftentimes when people want to get started on this stuff, they don't know where to start, right? So, maybe you have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, to your point, I think the promise of AI or what's being seen is driving a lot of pressure. I think it's our job to take a step back and say, what does it take to actually make this happen? So
actually create value.
To create the value.
Because we're not seeing that at the CFO level.
Yep.
We're asking, where's the value from AI?
And when we are deploying the solution or even the approach, there's that constant pressure that's going to be on you as the technology provider, right, in our company and our partners to show that value. But you take a step back, and if I use your example or Paul's, we're take an example of bringing the data from multiple different sources. Today, we kind of have the native tools that allows you to do the analytics, but it's difficult. In order for us to apply the new technology, we are building something called asset template, right? So that's a smart spreadsheet, but to do that, it takes a lot of effort, okay? And to maintain that, it even takes more efforts from the same experts, reliability engineers or improvement engineers, and so on. So bringing the data from your site, the process unit, the sensors, you pull it all together, but then now applying the machine learning algorithms to actually build it. So it does it like 90% right, for instance, which is great because now you're only then asking those experts to validate the parts that we missed, freeing up their time to do what needs to be done, and then use that template to feed into the platform, then do the whole orchestration part of it, and then either you get the analytics or generative analytics, it doesn't matter. But that's when I think what we are seeing is that, hey, this is helping me. Yes, I was able to do that, but now I'm actually doing other things. Or the AI engine's actually monitoring it constantly, assigning the risk scores, and then I can go do something about it. Before, I was spending a ton of time just trying to figure that part out or finding it after the fact. I think that is more important right now. I can say that for Dow, and understanding that, okay, if we do this thing, then it's better use of our time, and yes, the value will come, okay? Versus trying to apply what we are seeing in terms of AI or the promise of AI, and our executives are going to push that, hey, make that happen over here. So it's also teaching and making sure that people understand that foundational uplift is going to be done, have to be done in order to achieve that target.
Yeah.
So
Let's ask the audience this. You saw Arthur's thing as to what kind of an agent really was. That's a lot of words. And so if your executives ask you what the fundamental basis of an agent is, how many people know how to answer that really simply? And no is okay, right? If you don't, right? So think of it this way. What do I need to know, right? A very basic construct, Pearl's ladder. What do I need to know, right? It's knowledge, right at the bottom, right? The next thing is, what do I need to do with it, right? The very thing of what I need to know. Take what I need to know. What do I need to do with it when I know it? That's the next thing. And so what that would be is that's a middle rung of Pearl's ladder, which is that rung is saying I'm going to take something and apply an action to it. But the question is, how do I know when I need to do it? The only thing that answers that is called perspective, right? And that is the very top rung of Pearl's ladder of causation. Pearl's ladder of causation says that if I understand the principles of something, right? If I can imagine why I'm doing this, right? If I put things in perspective, the very top rung of Pearl's ladder of causation tells me when I need to do it, right? So I need perspective, I need context, and I need knowledge. That is an agent. And that's what you have to have. And that's why you hear everybody up here say, you got to get your foundational elements pulled together. Because if your foundational elements can't deliver that, guess what you can't do? You can't do any of it. None of it. You just heard him say it?
Yeah, Mike, and I think the part that's also a little bit abstract is when you're understanding what needs to be solved, right?
Yes.
You need to bring, multimodal, meaning you have unstructured data, images, structured data, all of that stuff put into a location. But then the autonomy is going to come, the smarts is coming from when the question is being asked, it has to go and negotiate where the right information is to produce the right answer. Okay?
And where's it get that from?
Yeah, and that's the piece where you need the knowledge and the experts coming together and teaching, and that's really the part that requires heavy lifting, because you think that I ask the question, it just gives me the answer, but when you ask the question, the algorithm has to figure out where do I go get the information, because you're going to have to build the trust in the model, right? So if I'm asking the question about how much does it cost to fix this problem, well, I need to go to my maintenance data in ERP. Versus like, this is the problem. It broke 10 times. What was done to fix it? That's probably more the procedures in the manuals. Okay? So having that kind of understanding, breaking it down so that you are working those models to produce the right information for, depending on the role, is where the heavy lifting is happening.
So what do I need to know? What do I need to do with it? When do I need to do it? And if you start framing it in kind of that way, it helps you understand how to think about this agent world. Matter of fact, there's a demonstration of kind of this tomorrow sometime, right, Mark?
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock tomorrow. So you kind of see what this multi-agent world looks like in that framework, right? And then kind of how to think about going and building this, right, when you engage for yourself. But it doesn't work without the foundational elements that these guys talk about.
So I think, you want to go?
Yeah, you got it.
All right. So we were talking a lot about supply chain before, because I think that it's a less risky place to start, so to speak. If that makes sense. Because if you get down to your shop floor and in your quality operation, you start to touch the product itself in a physical way, right? And one of the things that I find interesting foundationally is I think a good chunk of this room is probably a bunch of engineers, probably working the OT layer quite a bit. I'm obviously on the other side, the IT side. But what I found in my experiences, we're really, really good at building a facility, gathering data in that facility, and doing something with it.
Right.
But what we're not as good at, just in general, is figuring out how else I might use that and what else I might connect it with. And one of the things I started preaching, and I learned it from my OT compatriots, right, is all about the data historian, right? I started preaching this in 2016 where I was before, because it was the single best investment you could make and control locally in your plant, add downstream value later. And knowing what your data is, is your equipment connectable? That's always important. If it is, are you streaming it somewhere? Are you capturing that context? And God forbid we actually had standards. So one of the things that I've noticed is if you work in a large multinational company, you've probably grown through acquisition as well. So the equipment layer is different. The software around that's different. The historian stuff's always different. So like you have, 10 different owners for 6 different plants kind of thing. You come through history. So defining a standard, like we happen to use PI, but like an asset framework standard that can be replicated from plant to plant. The idea being if you make the same thing in more than one location, wouldn't it be great if you could share that data? That would be awesome. If we called things the same way, that would be a good place to foundationally start. And within your control is looking at that layer and working with your other plants in your network to define your standards for the type of product that you're making. And when you're making stuff that takes months to years to actually come to a finished product, understanding where it is in that life cycle is super important. So for us, it was always, where's it at in its batch life cycle, right? What batches are going into what batches to make that end product across this network of plants? What quality issues might we run into? Where are they at in their stage of we have a standard investigation time frame to figure things out and put in fixes for the future? What's holding stuff up? In our world, lab testing. So there are 30 lab tests that have to be done. Some of them take 30 or more days to execute. You can't release the product until that's done. How do we know where something is? We did get to the point where we mapped a lot of that out through knowledge graph capabilities to understand where things were. The part we didn't get to that I'm now thinking about is the agent that could sit on top of those, on all that process information, once that was standardized, really helped people become more effective at answering that question. In this case, for our individual plants to their supply chain partners, like, hey, where's my stuff? I have customers. I need to get it out there. Like, where is everything? What's holding it up?
What happened last night?
Yeah, exactly. So like, I could see this world where that's a possibility, but we didn't quite get there yet. But we did years of work to get to the point where it became a possibility. And we're going to keep saying that again and again, I think.
Oh, maybe the one thing, because we keep talking foundations, and I have to admit, when I spent 20 years in DuPont, and then I'm here in Owens Corning for 2. And one of the things when I first entered Owens Corning was some of the work that we're now doing. It wasn't the first time they thought about it. They thought about it years ago, but they ended up in purgatory because they've said the data's quality is not there. We got to fix that first. Great, fix, never. So it got stuck, right? And so it would be good. I'll share my perspective, but I'm kind of curious of your all's too. Is so we did start, and yes, we ran into data quality problems, but you know what? We learned on how to fix it, and we also learned what data was actually important to us. Because again, just because you can measure it doesn't mean you really need to use it to make a decision or a good decision. But I felt like just dive in. You don't want to get into POC purgatory either, right? So you have to balance it, but just starting and recognizing you don't want to get into purgatory again, I think really is important. But I'm just kind of curious because then I worry about the POC purgatory and people might counter me with that.
I mean, for me, it always starts with what was said before, like what problem are we trying to solve, right? Like having a clear understanding of I'm trying to solve problem X, Y, Z. In this one instance I talked about before, there's a product shortage. We need to do whatever we can to get more things made quicker of higher quality. Well, that drives me backwards through the supply chain to figure out, well, how does that all work? What data do I need to help make that a reality? And you can ask that question again and again and come up with different answers, but that's definitely how you start. But as you're doing it, you want to think wider and say, okay, I want to be able to replicate and scale this thing again and again and again. I don't want to just build a one-off capability that measures one thing.
I think couple of years ago in this forum, right, we all talked about the need for having a standard data platform and all that. I think everybody knows that it's needed. To me, Paul, every company faces same or similar challenges. I think we can just simplify into, I would say, 4 things. One, your data, variety, and where it resides is in many, many source systems, okay? So anybody who is expecting us to go down this path needs to know that the data quality is a challenge and there is no way out but to deal with it, okay? The second thing is that it's in all kinds of formats. Even though it's maintained in all those systems, to do what we need to do, we're going to have to deal with that, addressing, the harmonization, whether it's a structured or unstructured data. The killer for us, and I think it's true for everybody, that there are only few experts in their respective domain, whether it's supply chain, operations, engineering, maintenance, quality. They are needed to validate what we're doing. If you're building the models for the purpose of achieving the results, they are the one whose time is needed. So those 3 things are like not going to let us go fast unless we have some kind of unified approach. And then there's going to be hundreds of different business models that varies by the business or the type of operation that you're in to enable these things. So I think if we can keep that straight, it would allow us to say, hey, okay, I can do a POC, but it's not going to get me where you are expecting me to get. If you want to scale it, then I don't only need experts from this plant or supply chain or commercial, but I would need others. I think important for us is to get that framework, get the templates going so that next time when we do a scaling, we're significantly faster, right? And that's the approach that we have applied. The first couple of implementations have been tough, very tough. Yeah. Once we get the asset template going, once we kind of know how to feed that, how to build the models, the like assets are going very fast. And that's, to me, it's an important learning and keeps me grounded in our teams.
So you're saying the work is up front, the hard work.
Hard work is up front to gain credibility is what I'm saying.
Okay. Mike Tomasco, you had made a mention that when you brought up the supply chain example and the 2 MIT grads, et cetera, you said you made a passing comment that you started with a hard example first. That's counterintuitive. Most people start with something simple so they can get a quick win. Why did you do that?
It was to prove that it could be done. Oftentimes, the most complex problem is the one people walk away from, and it was a good example of the use of optimization algorithms and how they could be applied to solve a very real problem. That's really why. It was the challenge as well. Like it made the people that were assigned that program very, very interested in solving the problem.
So
Go ahead.
I don't know if you guys read a lot. There's a book written last year by Adam Grant. You guys read a lot? It's called Hidden Potential, right? In that book, Grant talks about the companies. This answers your question, right? The companies that and people that achieve the most do the uncomfortable thing first. That those that do the comfortable things first typically are the ones that are always behind. And so in doing that,
That's a good
right,
point.
it's that culture within your company was, well, let's look at the most uncomfortable thing because that teaches us the most. Yeah. And let's go do that. And kind of what you do is you look at your enterprise and say, if I look at the customer and my asset and say, well, why does my organization exist? Right? My organization exists for me to exert control over my ability to service my customer. And the way I exert that control is through the function and process and the executable piece that the organization goes and performs, right? And what we're really saying is that if you can get the foundation right, you can convert the way that organization exerts control over that function and process also into something that's predictable in digital, right? By using this calculus, right? and turning this complexity into something that's done for them, right? So you put the power of compute against it for people to use in the same way they used to use a calculator to do the math that they couldn't do, right? Except now it's across the entire enterprise that the organization exists across in order to exert control. And it's done in real time. That's where the value is. The value is the speed of decision between what used to take months and weeks to instantaneous. And if you can't understand that, you really just need to go home because you don't deserve to be in business anymore. Well, that's harsh, isn't it? Because what the world has proved is that these winner-take-all markets are all determined by one thing. He who makes decisions the fastest wins. Can I say it again? He who makes decisions the fastest wins. And if it's not you, get ready. Your assets are going to have somebody's name on them that's not yours in 5 years. 5 years.
Okay.
Wow.
See, I told you I'm on the way out.
I wrote that down.
It's like someone retired.
How about that, Ben? Amen.
Absolutely. Can we get someone with a mic to run around? There we go. Up here. What we're going to do is we're going to have somebody here, and then somebody in the back ask a question, and then somebody up here again, and so this guy gets his exercise. Right? No, right up here. Steep anchor. Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, this has been fascinating. And Mark, you've had an easy job. You've barely had to ask a question. These guys had a great conversation. I'll tell you where I get confused. I think our vocabulary
Amen.
has changed, right? So a few years ago, we talked a lot about microservices in a platform, right? And so you might have a microservice that would allow you to efficiently build a pallet. You might use that Microsoft in your WMS, or that same microservice might be called in TMS. To me, that sounds like an agent. Am I wrong?
No, I feel the same way. I think we just keep coming up with new marketing terms for consultants to sell us things. And we keep falling for it. It's different technology. The technology evolved, but the concept is similar. The promise of the universal service bus from many years ago, I mean, that never really happened. But I think as the technology evolves, it becomes more possible to have that come true.
Well, the thing I think is different, and again, I just want your perspective, is that that would be an example of an agent within a platform, within a supply chain platform.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we're starting to say, let's also have agents that reside outside that platform, and let's orchestrate how they work together. Is that how you're seeing it?
I think it's that, and they're autonomous. They make their own choices. That's the difference. Like in the olden model there with the service bus, like we were telling it and orchestrating what to do and when. This is now it'll figure that out on its own.
The infrastructure doesn't change largely, right? So whatever ERP you're using, right? None of the infrastructure really changes. All it does is provide the information, right, that the agent uses for you to orchestrate with and it make decisions with. And if you think about that, when I talked about the organization, the enterprise, everything between the asset and the customer, all that executable stuff becomes software defined. That's the world we're talking about.
I mean, what'll be really interesting too is I think every software company now will have agents AI agents as part of their scheme and marketing, and it'll confuse things because then those agents won't actually talk with each other unless you're on that vendor's ecosystem. Like we heard it this morning from Exxon, right, in the open process automation stuff. We need things to be open and interoperable, regardless of what software platforms we use or what hardware vendors we use that also have a software component. That way things can talk with each other much more simply than they do today.
And from my perspective, like when we say autonomous, right? So if you have a microservice or a service today, it's available. You could use that. You could call on that service.
Yeah.
It's just that the platform is intelligent enough because of the compute power, right, to do multiple things. But existing information about getting data from an ERP data source, if it's available, you'll call on that. That's an agent to retrieve the data that you're looking for. I think the key is to put that information in the hand of the user, and that microservice is being called when it's needed. That's the difference, right? So I think the how part is probably going to get better, but I don't think it's going away, at least not right now.
Yeah, I think 2025 will be the year of agent confusion,
Yeah.
and then it'll start to be normalized probably in the near future. Yeah.
But yeah, just my only added to that, again, as a TMS, WMS, all that stuff. I mean, don't underestimate the foundational change of having the large language and vision models and all that, enabling and bringing that context, which is way different than 5 or 6 years ago when we're talking those same platforms. So to be the capability of an agent WMS is going to be much different in the future than the version we're speaking of.
Yeah,
So not only autonomous, but again, bringing me, the user, the context who's working at the warehouse or doing the transportation planning. Right?
I think that's right. I think fundamentally in even our personal lives, imagine a world that doesn't exist in clicks. That's what you're talking about. You're talking about a world that doesn't get measured in web traffic. So how do you survive if you're Google and you basically your revenue is based on ads and you don't have any more web traffic and clicks don't matter anymore because it's an agent-based world? That's the world we're talking about. It is completely different. It's fundamentally different because it's degrees of separation, and because the information is not intermediated through the network anymore. It's direct 1 degree separation. That's what that means.
Another question? Back there? Folks, be thinking about questions you'd like to ask.
How y'all doing? Great panel so far. I've got a question. Saying the kind of quiet part out loud, a lot of folks' data quality and integrity is not in a position to even start to entertain some of these processes, right? What would your advice be to somebody who's tasked with this, go find the AI solution question that needs to kind of actually say, let's take a step back and maybe do some, eat our vegetables first before we can start to move forward? How do you approach that conversation with the leadership team?
You want to go?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'll start. That's a great question, and that's the focus on fundamentals. The aspect of data governance, right? At Dow, at least, we recognize and we knew that there's an issue, and create a concept of data literacy, if you will. So you have really, really technically savvy people. Like in the previous example, people who wrote microservices. They know exactly what to do with the data, but they don't understand how the data actually flows through the digital thread, right? So if you're looking at an engineering data and then handing it over to production, then to quality, and then to supply chain, there's different talent and different expertise that are needed. That's not technical expertise, so they have to work together, and working together, figure out the expected output is going to look like this, right? Meaning, like, I want simplification, getting my answer quickly, and I want it to be trustworthy. So then you take a step back and say, what do I need to do to cleanse the data? That's the variety of data sources that I talked about, and what does it look like? And no one individual, not the technical expert alone, not the business process expert alone can do it. So working together, then you invoke on a strategy of cleansing the data, maintaining the data. I know we didn't talk about much, but also the source of the data that's trustworthy and how the information is protected. So not all data, every question you ask a question, you get an answer, but the answer that I may get is slightly different than what Mike would get based on the privileges that he has if the IP data is there, right? So those are the things. They're not very very fun types of topics, okay? It takes a lot of effort, and nobody likes to do this stuff. But when you start putting this whole program together about the data literacy that I'm talking about, you'll see that there's a ton of uplifting that has to happen, and you keep on hearing the word responsible AI, as an example. And then the last piece is this, another term that we keep on hearing is human in the loop. So even if you create something that works after doing all this work, those experts are the one who validate that, make sure that that model's right. So that's pretty much how
So
I
I
would
think you
describe
gave a nice holistic answer. I'll give you like the direct thing. I'm doing this right now. I just stepped into a new role 2 months in, completely different company. I don't know all the players. I kicked off a team last week of some of the smartest people I found so far. 5 super smart people, process data scientists and biopharma, right? Like these are people that are super smart, right? And I asked them, what problem do you want to solve for? Because they're sitting there talking about this system and that data and this quality. Like, think big picture and then work backwards, right? I'll figure out the how, like the tactical how and what we need to bring to bear to make that happen. But I need those really smart people to have an idea and a vision for what it is that they really want to accomplish. Do we want to improve the yield of a product? Because in our industry, that's a big payback. I think the answer is probably yes. So pick one and let's work backwards on that. And that'll help us figure out all of the investment required and the time to put in the pieces that make that sustainable. Because we can do it one-off now. And like you can pull all the data together, brute force it, and make some good stuff happen. And sometimes we do that just to satisfy the urgent need to solve a problem. But how do we do that holistically, as Malik was just explaining, so that it's sustainable and scalable? That's where you kind of have to map it all out and then just build the bricks. And it literally kicked it off last week. What do you guys want to do? So they haven't gotten back to me yet, but I think I know.
I think one of the things you're hearing, I hope one of the things you're hearing, and Ben said this to me earlier today because he's always reminding me. He said, Mike, if you want to be better at golf, the first thing you probably oughtn't do is go buy a brand new pair of golf clubs to get better at golf.
Driving range.
And
That's what I would say.
And he's right? If you want to play in the NFL, you have got to be really good at blocking. You got to be really good at tackling these fundamental things. And even if you say I'm not gonna pay attention to all the data because that's a waste, you still got to be really good at managing the data you need. Absolutely. Right? That's always going to be true. So figuring out these things that are true for yourself that you have to be good at, you're going to have to be really good at supply chain stuff, right? And figuring out how to manage that. And so that's part of playing in the NFL is you got to be professional at these things in order to convert them to autonomous.
Okay, that's a great point. Somebody else with a question?
I felt like that was the mic drop moment.
Yeah.
To
Okay.
be honest, from Mike.
Let me not go.
Yeah, you're done.
No,
He's done.
Let me get the last.
Nah.
Yeah, you're the ref now.
I'm the ref. Cool.
I'm going to pay you off.
I was gonna say the Kansas City ref, but
Ben, you got a question? He's been mentioning your name. You should ask him a question. Really
Ben.
hard one.
Ben knows more answers than I do.
Tiptoeing all around it.
Than me, Ben.
You do not want to give me a microphone. So I like to oversimplify stuff to the gentleman who asked the question. Go do what you can with what you got. Just try something. Like get started.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about this foundational thing. I mean, I've been coming to this thing for, I don't know, on and off for about 12 or 13 years, I think.
13.
And we keep having that conversation, right? Let's figure out our foundational data. If I get my foundational data and my foundational systems and I connect all the stuff, and I add historians, and I add advanced process control, and then I add analytics, and maybe one day I'll be great. Just go do what you can with what you got. And if you're going to take that approach, and Paul, I know that's kind of the way you've leaned into this, right? What can I do with what I got? And we'll find shortcuts and we'll find ways to figure out what the value is, and then we'll focus our limited resources on what's important. So just get started. Just start. Don't wait for the foundations to be great. But if you're going to do that, one thing you can do so that you don't reinvent the wheel over and over again is, I think the most valuable thing you can do for your underlying data quality and structure and contextualization is to make it very, very easy. Find a way to make it very, very easy for the consumers of that data to add, improve, enhance the context and structure and relations of the data. And when I say consumers, I don't just mean human beings and subject matter experts and domain experts. I mean agents, right? Anything that uses data and consumes data and discovers and uncovers connections, you need to have a way to capture that. And it's not that much work once you start crowdsourcing the problem. If consumers know that I only have to do this once and that structure is going to be maintained and I can build on it and I can leverage it next time around, you'll start to accelerate the process of taking data and turning it into actionable insights along the way. And one day you'll wake up and you'll be like, hey, I got most of the information I need to drive most of the decisions about what to do with my assets already kind of sitting there ready for use. And then all of the edges, all the stuff that you can't govern in the data that's kind of ugly, if you're not using it, you don't need it.
Nice. Thank you.
Good job.
Yeah, you should be on the panel, Ben.
I'm right.
I don't know why you're always out there.
Next year.
Takes my spot, Ben.
Any other questions? Okay, I got a question then. So, Mike, Mike Tomasco, you had mentioned, you made a distinction earlier on between algorithms or math
Yeah.
and AI.
Yep.
Can you expound on that a bit?
Yeah, I mean, AI is probably the most misused term in the whole like IT digital transformation space. Everybody calls anything with an equation in it AI now, and that's not good, right? Because doing like multivariate analysis is much harder math to do, and a lot of people can't do it. Versus basic simple stuff. So I have found in my experience that you actually get more value out of doing the hardcore math, let's say, and focusing on multivariate problems and trying to come up with solutions to various things. And then you can wrap stuff around it. Like, so a lot of people might have a golden batch concept in your process data, right? And you can do things to monitor that and optimize your golden batch. I think I talked about this yesterday in the DTC meeting. We've been doing that. And when you put the graphs that come out of that in front of process scientists, like, okay, add some of this, do some of that, like to maintain optimal levels. When you put that same graph in front of an operator, they don't have the same gut feeling reaction to it. So it was funny. When we started doing some Gen AI stuff to consume some of our internal information and quality information and have let's call it the small language model married with a large language model and interpret the data set coming off the time series data there, when you added text to it to kind of make that interpretation of, suggested best next step, so to speak, the process scientists like, why are you wasting my time? I know how to read a graph. Right? It was that kind of reaction, but the operator is a whole different ballgame. Now you have human in the loop still, but they don't have to necessarily understand the graph. They have to trust that process scientist helped involved and made the thing, right? And they teach them this is what it's doing. But you basically are multiplying the impact your scarce process scientist resource can have on the broader community. So you're augmenting human intelligence that way, I feel. So you're using a Gen AI tool on top of a hardcore math tool together creates more value than definitely either one alone. So that's what I was talking about.
Any questions?
What do I need to know?
One more question.
Yeah, exactly.
Autonomous multi-equation searching as AI. That'll be interesting. From demand companies.
Thanks for the wonderful panel. At the risk of repeating some of the earlier questions that were asked, one of the questions I have is obviously we're talking a lot about technology and we're talking about how the technology needs to be aligned to the goals of the company. Don't do AI when you don't need to do AI. If you just are looking for doing some spreadsheets, do that and not do AI for anything and everything, and don't have this attitude of AI can solve everything. But if I have a genuine project that I'm doing and AI makes sense for that, but then I don't have management buy-in on that, and if I want to try to expand it in my organization, what are some of the advices that you can provide to a company or a group like that so that they can get buy-in? Because I think getting that management buy-in is very, very important. And we know that 80% of the IoT projects fail because it starts somewhere, but then they're not able to get the ROI, or they're not able to get the management push for it to succeed. So I just wanted to get your feedback on that.
I mean, you have to speak the language of your audience, right? So if you're speaking to upper management, dollars and cents are usually what's going to get something through. I mean, qualitative improvements are nice. Cost avoidance capabilities are good, but truly showing, hey, here's where we make this money back, that speaks volumes to people and usually breaks down any resistance or barrier. Even if they don't understand the solution or the technology, I have found that if you speak in that language, it's more understandable, right? It's
So let's try this, right? Just as an idea. Most people start with an idea of just describing technology and assuming that can be translated into some type of outcome, and it usually can't. So if you start describing the features that technology has, how those features can be used to shape a benefit that help you deliver an outcome, right, that everybody wants, right? Now, what use cases do is use cases help you understand from a teaching perspective what features those technology brings that help you understand the benefits that enable those outcomes. So you don't use use cases to help you shape value. You help use cases as to help you shape what learning is for. Out of use cases, you build what's called a value case. And so if you tie it together that way and show that you have a progression of trying to understand these features that technology has about it, because it has features about it that help you shape all the way to an outcome, right? That makes the company advantaged. Don't do it just because you can make money. Anybody can do things just because you can make money. You have to do it because it creates an advantage that your competitor can't go do, right? And if you frame it like that, people will turn you down. Everybody wants to create an advantage that puts them in a superior position over their competition. And never got turned down. Ben was the master at it, drawing circles on a board.
And
look at him smile because he knows it's true.
And because I had to do that, right, build the cases and all this. I mean, my only other advice, and this is, I was talking about this at lunch, is some of this is inevitable, right? And I always link to the future of work of talent. And, you know, Gartner released a survey that said Gen Z, 25% of Gen Zs working in supply chain, for example, would quit their job today if they could go get the exact same pay to work at a company that's using Gen AI in their workflow. And so to me, it's because it's going to be the inevitable. You do have to also sell, yes, we can save money, maybe it's OPEC, blah, blah, blah. But at some point, it also is, I'm not going to have people work for me if I don't do these things. And, you know, and we all know there's shortages of labor for manufacturing shop floor. And, you know, I believe the same will occur to many fields, that if we don't evolve, then they're just going to go work for somebody else.
So here's a test for all of you. Go to your leadership and ask them how your company makes money. And the answer better be your competitive advantage. Because if it give you a mechanical answer, you might want to rethink things. Right? The answer ought to be the competitive advantage answer as to how your company makes money over their competition. When you ask them, how do we really make money?
I was going to say, it's not about taking a project to say, I want to implement AI. It's more about understanding your corporate strategy and say how what you are proposing is going to help your company towards their growth target or improve productivity, or in our case, let's say safety and reliability of running your assets. Okay? That's the language they understand, and you have to clearly articulate. So for us, let's say we're spending the CapEx, there's quite a bit of money that's being spent. One of the strategies, delivering turnarounds flawlessly. Can what we are proposing allow me to do that? Meaning, if it takes 58 days for that event, can I do it in 57 days safely and reliably? As an example. And by doing that, if you're going to save 2 days and X millions of dollars, then you should get the support. Okay, that's a good way of thinking in terms of getting the support that you need from the executives.
Okay. I think we're out of time. Slide. I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to also ask that if you would like to be on a panel about this, because you've got a whole year to do something, let me know. I would love to have a panel just like this with you on it.
I'd love to come to one of these things and not be on a panel.
I want to see Orlando.
Well, next year might be your year, bro. The other thing I want to mention is at 1 o'clock tomorrow, we mentioned it earlier, there's one of our sponsors, Parable.ai, is doing a workshop about Agentic AI. They're going to show some of what they've done for another company. And if you're interested, please attend. Thank you very much. And a round of applause for my panel.